Hey, welcome to Next Level Method Podcast. I'm Richard Ryerson.
And I'm Matt Lilly.
And we're here to help you take your life to the next level. Let's get started.
On today's podcast, we've got Dr. Nate Regier with Next Element. Just really cool podcast about compassion and how we can operationalize compassion in our home life and also in our business. So Nate Regier, my friend, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be with you, Matt and Maria.
Yes, it's been several years, but I've done quite a bit of training with your organization, probably over a decade ago, and really appreciated the way your team engaged in life and engaged in helping people live better lives. So I was certainly very excited to have you on the show today.
Well, likewise, when I learned about the show you were doing and remembered some of the early work we did together, I know we were both on a quest for wellness in our own ways and trying to make the world a better place. Yes. So it's good to be circling back.
Yeah, we're still in it, aren't we? We're still doing the work. So a lot of your work, as we talked pre-show, a lot of your work is around compassion. And so I guess what's your organization? How's that show up in your organization? What does compassion mean, I guess, to you, or how are you defining compassion?
Yeah, compassion it's a popular term. It's certainly in the last year or two during the pandemic, it's gotten real popular because, everyone says we're in this together. We got to have more compassion, more empathy, understand each other. But compassion really is something that has been foundational to our company and to our company culture and to our philosophy of how we are with each other and how we teach our clients and our client organizations to be with each other. For us, compassion is a lot more than just empathy or altruism or, acts of kindness for people. It comes from the Latin root meaning to suffer with. Compassion means with suffer. And so this idea of suffering with someone means that we are struggling together towards something better, something good. It's not about taking away the suffering. Often we think, I want to alleviate their suffering, so I'm going to donate to the cause, or I'm going to send money, or I'm going to, go do something. But taking away the suffering is really not the point. The purpose of life is not the absence of suffering. The purpose of life is the purposeful suffering. And I think when we struggle together with people, it brings purpose and connection and creates pretty amazing things. And so that's kind of philosophically our foundation for what compassion is, and why we have dedicated so much time and effort to try to make that a reality in more people's lives.
And I love that definition, to suffer with. I think that's how you define it, to suffer with versus trying to
suffer or struggle.
Suffer or struggle with. And actually, for some reason, it made me think of, I guess, in the Jewish tradition, what do they call it? Sitting Shiva or something like that? Isn't that what they call it? When somebody dies, they kind of come sit with people for a length of like days or something. I mean, I think people rotate in, but they and it's to help people navigate grief, I think, is the thought, right?
That's a custom I grew up with in Africa. My parents were missionaries, and I remember spending many nights. They were called masagas. In African cultures. The very same thing is when there's a death, we don't just all rush in to bring meals and do all this and raise money, and we just come and sit with people and we go through it together. And there's something really powerful about that.
And I had forgotten, and thank you for reminding me that you didn't necessarily have a Midwestern normal. I'd completely forgotten. So, but you mentioned it, so now it's free game in the show right now.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's part of my past. It really is part of who I am.
Yeah. So were you? And so for everybody listening or watching, so you're about 30 miles from where we are. So we're both in Kansas, right? All of us live in Kansas. But did you start out here, or is this something you migrated to later in life?
Well, my family is all from around here.
Okay.
My parents and grandparents were from farming communities here near Whitewater and Elbing and outside of Wichita.
Yeah.
But my parents chose to be missionaries and left and went to Africa at a very young age. And so I was actually supposed to be born there, but my dad had to come back for back surgery, emergency back surgery. And so my mom, who was pregnant, came and I ended up being born here in Newton. So my roots are here.
Right. But then how long were you in Africa? What was that length of
11
time?
years total.
Right.
I spent my first 8 or 10 years on and off childhood in Zaire, in rural, which is now the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Okay.
And then high school, I went to high school in Botswana in the 1980s, which was during apartheid in South Africa.
Wow.
And so this is when Nelson Mandela was in prison still.
Wow.
And apartheid was the regime in South Africa. So that was the context within which I kind of all my teenage years.
So literally, you graduated high school out of country then. Mm-hmm. Wow. So you're literally all of your foundational life was spent in Africa.
Pretty much, yeah. I went to middle school here, but that was about it until college.
Wow. So that's definitely got to give you a different perspective than most of us that grew up in the States, I would say. Not just Kansas, but most of us that grew up in the States.
Well, yeah, I'm a multicultural kid, or maybe a kid with no culture, kind of like military kids. I think missionary kids and military kids have a lot of things in common from moving around, and but also having seen so many different perspectives on things.
Right.
And my parents, and I come from a Mennonite background, and for those that don't know Mennonite, it's a Christian denomination that focuses heavily on peace and nonviolence and service. And so being in parts of the world where there was a lot of violence, but being indoctrinated with nonviolence as a way of responding, it really presented some difficulties for me, things to reconcile. Is how do we interact? How do we engage productively when we're choosing not to be violent, but we can't get rid of the conflict, and conflict is everywhere. And so that was something I struggled with growing up in ways that maybe a kid going to high school in a pretty much predominantly white school in central Kansas wouldn't necessarily have to deal with.
Right. Well, and that, I truly believe that most of us, if we lean into our purpose, that comes from some of our early formative years. And it sounds like, now this kind of, I'm starting to see some of the puzzle, I'm sure just a small part of the puzzle, but your want to help spread compassion really came out of your own suffering with these competing things where you're seeing lots of strife and lots of just some that would be amazing, the amount of conflict, and then your own, like you said, your own family's cultural beliefs, religious beliefs. Those are, that's a pretty wide valley there that you got to cross, I would think, internally.
Oh, absolutely. And trying to find ways to make a difference, but also reconciling where is my place? How can I make a difference? And being a white male with a lot of privilege, I never was the one being mistreated. I've never been the one suffering as much as the one trying to help, trying to make a difference, trying to find a better way. But also, I saw a lot of helping that wasn't helpful growing up. And that's where we kind of came to understand what drama is. And drama really is these efforts to get involved in ways that really are self-serving and really about justification, not about truly empowering, truly helping find purpose. And so, I saw lots of missionary activity that was just creating dependence, coming in with some answer that had no appreciation for what people are going through. It wasn't based on empathy. I wasn't really in the long run meant to help anybody except to just feel better, to help ourselves feel like we were doing something useful. I didn't want to be part of that.
Right. Yeah. So it's kind of like the teaching a man to fish versus giving him a fish type philosophy. Is that
for a long time, I thought my dad invented that phrase, as well as a lot of ancient Chinese proverbs. And I never found out he didn't make those up at all.
That's you thought, you were kind of disappointed. You found out he might not have been as insightful as you thought, huh? He was
No.
That's funny. And so kind of what path did that take? So you came back to the States. Went to college, obviously. Well, you've got a PhD behind your name, so you've got to be smart, right?
Well, I don't know. I had to work hard.
Right.
Well, I came back to Bethel College in Newton, here where I live, which is a liberal arts school, and I was going to be a business major. I was all, Matt, you probably know a little bit about my personality from the work we did before, but I'm kind of an entrepreneur by heart. I was going to get rich. I was going to be a business person.
Right.
And I had a couple patent applications already by the time I was like 16 or 17. I never followed through on them, but But I was going to get rich and be a business person.
Right.
And I actually changed my major when I picked up the Economics 3 textbook for my third semester. And it was about this thick, for those of you who are just listening, about
Right.
2 inches thick. And
Right.
it was shrink wrapped with a 5-inch floppy disk
Oh, right.
or 5.5 inch. Some of you might remember those.
Yes, I
And
do.
I was told that this little thing could hold many, many textbooks worth of information on it. And so I didn't just see a 2-inch thick textbook. I saw a foot thick textbook.
Right.
And in that moment, I lost all of my confidence.
Right.
And I said, forget this. I'm not being a business major. And I went and changed my major to psychology at that point.
Interesting.
And I think still there was a purpose because ultimately I'm just a student of human behavior and
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to understand why people do what they do and how to get involved in positive ways to influence behavior change.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went on then to get a degree in psychology and went on to KU for my doctorate.
Mm-hmm.
But that was when everything changed for me.
Right.
It was a crisis of confidence, I guess.
Well, as you said, it all works out or points us in
Yeah.
directions, right? And you've actually worked in clinical settings, not just in business. Is that didn't you work
Yeah, I
with?
started my career as a clinical psychologist
Mm-hmm.
working for a large multi-specialty behavioral health hospital.
Right.
I did everything from inpatient addictions work to neuropsychological testing to a lot of work with geriatric psychology,
Mm-hmm.
and just a whole bunch of different things. I was lucky to be in an organization where I could try lots of things,
Mm-hmm.
find what I liked and what I didn't like, and yeah, 11 years of that before starting Next Element.
And so what was the catalyst for starting Next Element? Because obviously that's well, I shouldn't say obviously. My perception is that it's focused a little bit more on business and
Yeah.
an individual path. So you went from this clinical setting to this more business setting or corporate setting. So what was that? The thought process there.
My wife told me early on in our marriage, she said, Nate, you are going to own a business someday.
Right.
You're not destined to be a therapist. You're good at it, but you're
Right.
not destined to do that. And she was right because although I was good at what I did and I worked hard at it,
Mm-hmm.
it never gave me the joy
Mm-hmm.
that when I started doing, I got an opportunity to do consultation liaison work in an integrated behavioral medicine clinic, working kind of on the fly, case by case, real quick with physicians, doctors, trying to coordinate care. And I really liked that more fast paced consulting type of work.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to work for a corporate team building kind of division of our organization, started to do like team facilitation, ropes courses, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, fun
I
stuff.
fell in love with working with groups in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when where it wasn't about diagnosing someone as broken or defective in order to get paid, it
Right.
was really about pursuing wellness instead of fixing brokenness. And at that moment, I think something clicked inside of me, and I realized I don't want to see people the way I need to view them in order to do clinical work.
Got it.
And I don't have the patience to do hour after hour one-on-one work. I
Mm-hmm.
really, it was draining the life out of me.
Mm-hmm.
And so a couple of us in the organization all kind of found each other working on the adventure course and some other places, and we
Mm-hmm.
just loved what we were doing. And we started saying, man, how many lives could we impact if we started working with businesses
Mm-hmm.
instead of waiting for people to show up in our therapy offices?
Right.
And I was running an EAP program, employee assistance program, and I got to work with businesses then and help provide services for people that didn't need to be diagnosed and didn't need to enter the system, so to
Right.
speak.
Right.
And I just love that. And so that was kind of the catalyst for me. And eventually we just decided to start our own thing and just went for it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And yeah, as you know, once you get the entrepreneurial bug, you're bitten and you have that for the rest
Yep.
of your life, right?
Yep.
There's no getting away from it.
I can't imagine ever working for anyone again, even though I'm working harder than I ever did.
Of course,
Yeah.
yeah, yes. That's
Yeah.
kind of what I usually say is I'm unemployable, meaning I could
Yeah.
not work. I'm usually
Yeah.
more driven if I'm working for myself, or working in something that I can affect, I guess, more. For me, it's not
Yeah.
necessarily about having to own everything. It's just being a part of a
Yep.
team that's all kind of on the path to making things work. So now kind of so around this compassion, back to compassion. So
Yeah.
so now you're really focused on compassion. Before we started filming, you talked about there's 3 switches to compassion. So you want to get into that at this point?
Yeah,
Okay.
I will. So our Next Element, our company Next Element, we do a lot of training, consulting, coaching, but the overarching unifying theme and niche of what we do is around anything that builds what we call compassionate accountability.
Hmm.
How do we reconcile compassion with the kindness, the concern, the value of human beings and dignity with the reality of getting things done and the reality of we have goals, we have businesses to run, we have objectives and constituencies to serve. So how do we reconcile those? So everything we do is just around teaching and coaching people on how to do that. So we've developed methodologies for operationalizing compassion and teaching it and measuring it and everything. But right now, we're very interested in spreading something for free around the world. And
Hmm.
what we want to give people is a discovery that we made about 2 years ago, called the compassion mindset. And this discovery came from us asking ourselves this question, and maybe you've experienced the same thing. When you're working with people that want to change and they want to grow and or they're struggling and they want to move beyond that, it seems like some people just are able to embrace new concepts and ideas and run with them.
Hmm.
And then some people, no matter how hard they try, it just never seems to click, or there's just always something getting in the way. And it's not for lack of effort, it's not for lack of desire. It's like there's just something not clicking. And so we went back over 10 years of work and started trying to figure out what are the patterns. And what we realized is that the people that can fly, there are three switches that are turned on
Hmm.
inside these people.
Hmm.
And the people that struggle have one or more of those three switches turned off. And so we identified what those were, and we found that there's just three. And these switches have to do with how we view ourselves and other people, fundamental beliefs. And the concept of mindset is not new. I mean, there's the growth mindset. There's all these different mindsets, but the idea of a mindset is it's not a cult. It's not a developed skill. It's an attitude. It's something you can decide. And I'm curious, Maria and Matt, have you ever like maybe heard an inspirational speaker or read a book, and they say something or you read a line and you're never the same after
Mm-hmm.
that?
Hmm.
Like
Yes.
you can't unsee it. You
Right.
can't unhear that. And it fundamentally changes you inside. And you walk out of that program and you're different and you act differently going forward. It's not because you learned a new skill. It's because you changed something inside of you.
Hmm.
And so the three switches of the compassion mindset have that power to instantly change our behavior if we turn them on. And when they're turned off, it's just more drama, more drama, more drama.
And so you're going to
And
tell us
so
what.
my time's up. I
Like,
need to go.
And
I need to go.
yeah,
So.
exactly. And on next week's show, we'll be- so the three switches that you found that really help people integrate. I guess you're saying new ideas, new thoughts. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, it's not a thing, but it's how you do the thing.
Hmm.
It's not what you do, but how you approach what you do. And when we I'm reminded of an old ad back in, I think it was the 90s. It was BASF. It was a German
Uh-huh.
company,
Yeah, I
chemical
remember.
technical company.
Yeah,
They made like, you could see
yeah.
cassette tapes and other things.
BASF. We don't make the things. We make the things that you have work better or something like
Yes,
that.
you
Right?
remember
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
exactly what this is. So the
Yeah.
three switches aren't the thing you do, but when they're on, it makes the thing you do that much more powerful and effective.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's like a turbocharger for the engine or lubricant for
Hmm.
whatever. So I want to show you something here. This is the original three switches.
Hmm. Oh wow! Literally light switches.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when we discovered this, I ran to the hardware store and
Right.
bought this stuff and put together these three switches. And then I put all the labels on them, which I'm going to explain
Okay.
right here.
Nice.
So
Okay.
the three switches are value,
Hmm.
capability, and responsibility. And these are three dimensions of human existence. And the way it goes is that human beings are valuable, we are also capable, and we are also responsible. And this ties into our working definition of compassion, which is compassion is the practice of demonstrating that everyone, you and me, are valuable, capable, and responsible
Hmm.
in every interaction. So It's the practice of demonstrating, meaning this is a habit that we cultivate. It
Mm-hmm.
has to be shown through behavior. It can't just be something we're thinking. What are we demonstrating? Well, we're demonstrating the truth, the fundamental truths that humans are valuable, capable, and responsible. Well, when are we doing it? Always, every interaction, because it only comes to bear when we interact with each other. That's when it manifests.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we may be thinking about it and cultivating our attitude, but when we interact, it really comes alive and makes it real. So these three switches each have an on and an off.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take the value switch. The
Mm-hmm.
value switch is around this fundamental truth that all human beings are innately valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And when the switch is on, we accept that you are innately valuable. Nothing makes you more or less valuable. Um, And your value is never conditional on anything like the color of your skin or where you came from or your gender or your political beliefs or my past experiences with you or how well you performed on the last performance review. None of those things change your innate human value. So when the switch is on, it shows in our behavior.
Mm-hmm.
We assume positive intentions. You know, someone switches on when they say something like, people do the best they can with what they're given at any moment in time. We all do.
Mm-hmm.
Or when they say something like, well, I don't know where you were coming from. I'm going to trust that you were trying to do the best you could, and then I'm going to ask you about it. Or maybe when you make a mistake, I say, you made a mistake, but you aren't a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about your behavior without talking about who you are as a human being. So when the switch is on, we can get personal without making it personal.
Mm-hmm.
And you felt the difference every day you go on Facebook. You can see the moment when, oh, it just got personal. Someone just made it personal
Right.
by somehow connecting the fact that you don't agree with me or you're different to now you're less than as a
Right.
human being.
Okay.
So when the switch is on, we don't go there.
Mm-hmm.
But when the switch is off, we start to have thoughts, feelings, and beliefs about conditional worth. So we say things like, well, you're too short to play front row in volleyball, or women are not supposed to have positions of power, authority in a church, or, we can just go on about something about you makes you less valuable
So it's the
as a
label,
human being than
right?
someone else.
Basically, kind of generalizing or categorizing
Yeah.
somebody into a class of people that has less value than the class that
Yeah.
I'm espoused to be a part of. Is that kind of what we're?
Yeah, so when that value switch is off, the other thing is it makes us vulnerable to and kind of sets the stage for prejudice,
Mm-hmm.
stereotyping, unconscious bias, all of that, because we're allowing ourselves now to consider the possibility that a person's value could be conditional. So now we can place all the conditions we want on that, um, and that just allows everything to go. And maybe it could be as simple as you're only okay if you agree with me.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which is fairly
Or
common,
I'm
right?
only okay if you're happy with whatever I say, or I'm only okay
Right.
if I can make you happy every day. Otherwise, I'm not okay as a person. So it takes lots of different forms, and we can have our switches turned on or off with ourselves and with each other.
And is there some? So when you say switch, I mean that leads me to think that there's either a question or something that I can focus on to allow me to know one, maybe if the switch is on or off, or is there a way to actually to switch to turn it on? Is there an actual way to turn that on?
There is, and that's it's a little bit longer to talk about, but
Mm-hmm.
just a couple simple things.
Uh-huh.
One way to turn the switch on with other people is to ask them about how they're doing. Simply practice empathy by saying, "How are you doing? What's important to you?" And to take the time to understand and care about how they're experiencing the world.
Mm.
And that sends the message that your experience is valid because it's yours.
Right.
So simply taking the time to ask someone, how are you doing? What's going on with you? Listen to their feelings without interrogating them as if their feelings somehow have to be defended.
Right.
Um, and take the first step. When I get vulnerable and transparent and say, hey, I'm just gonna tell you how I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be scary because I don't know how you're gonna take it. But I do that because I'm valuable, and I'm valuable unconditional on how you respond to me.
Right.
But if I say, oh, I better not, I don't want to make you mad, or, I want to protect my children from the difficult anxieties that we're having as parents, all those things are saying that somebody's okay, the value is conditional on them being able to handle it. And so when we come clean with people about how we're doing and what we want and what our motives are, that's a way of turning the switch on for ourselves.
So you're going to just come around with me on a daily basis, and I can just whisper in your ear what I want from people, and then you can express that you can let them know. Would that work okay?
It's okay to tell people what you want. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're deserved to get it or entitled to get it.
Right.
But certainly you deserve to want it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That's a good clarification there. So that's switch 1.
Yep.
Switch 2.
So the second switch is the switch of capability. And the foundational principle is human beings are capable and anyone can contribute under the right conditions in a certain way. And so the belief is that everyone has the potential to and deserves to be included, invited, encouraged, challenged to grow and learn and make a difference and be part of the solution in some way. When the switch is on, we believe that capability is possible. And so the way you see people acting is they say things like, hey, what questions do you have? Or I'm curious, it looks like you're struggling with that. Do you want some help? Or, hey, I have a project for you. I'd love to teach you something new. When we invest in our employees by teaching them things, that's a way of saying, I believe you're capable. When we ask more from our children and from our families and say, I know you can do this, and I'm going to ask you to step up, and then I'm going to support you in getting there, we're saying you're capable. When the switch is turned off, we believe that capability is limited, that there's boundaries on it. And we say things like, well, I don't think I'm not going to invite so-and-so to the meeting because she really doesn't understand what we're talking about anyways. Or I'm not going to, maybe in a meeting, I'm only looking at certain people when I'm talking and I'm just ignoring other people's input because I really don't think they can have anything to offer that's valuable. And so I'm limiting their capability by doing that. And I'm limiting my own because I'm depriving myself of whatever they might say. Or we just have self-limiting beliefs, tell ourselves things like kind of what I said before is that I'm too short to do this, or, I can't be a business major because I can't handle a 5.5-inch floppy disk. Self-limiting beliefs. Or another way that we undermine capability, we turn our switch off, and I saw this a lot growing up, is we rescue. We go in and try to solve people's problems for them or give them answers, and we commit what I call non-consensual helping. And that truly non-consensual helping is a grave violation of human dignity and boundaries. Humans want to feel capable. They want to feel like they can do this. I mean, how early do children start saying, I can do this, or let me do it?
Yeah.
We want to learn and grow and fail and figure things out. So when we get in the way of that with human beings, we undermine capability.
I've got a 2-year-old, and she is very capable, and she is
Well,
very.
she believes she wants to be.
Exactly. Well, she's very
Yeah.
capable, and she's very good at, like, she would get, so she was snapping herself, so I snapped her into the high chair one day, right? And she's watching that, and then the next day, it was like, she wanted to snap herself into the high chair with all the buckles, and as soon as I started to lean over to touch, she just like yelled at me, she was just like, ha!
Yep.
And like knocked my hand away, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And ever since that day, I've never had to buckle her into another chair. But yeah, to your point with children especially, my son and my daughter, anytime they want to watch me one time. And then they want to try to do it immediately. And I'm like, well, maybe watch me 2 or 3 times. They're like, no. I got it, Dad. Let me try it now. So you're right. As children, we learn because we just want to do it, right?
It's a human nature to want to feel capable.
Right.
So not just valuable, but capable.
Right.
We don't just belong to a tribe or to a family, but we also contribute.
Right.
And that's what capability is about. And I think a lot of leaders we see that get promoted, we see the Peter principle come out where leaders are promoted beyond their skill level to build capability. They are promoted because they're capable. And so not because they're able to develop capability in others, whereas that's the fundamental skill of leadership at this point, in compassion. So they just want to do it. It's like, here, let me show you how. Here, I did this 100 times. Here's my strategy. Here, let me do it. And they come in swooping in and solve the problem all the time, and their people don't feel capable and resent them for that. It's not bad intentions. It's just that unintended consequences of having that switch off.
Right. And then switch 3, then
Switch
responsibility.
3 is called responsibility. And this is based on the fundamental truth that human beings are accountable to other people for their own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. I live in a community, which means I'm accountable to you because we are reliant on each other. But I'm responsible only 100% for my thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. I'm not responsible for yours.
Mm-hmm.
And when the switch is on, we enter every situation with the attitude that no matter what happened before, I am 100% responsible for what I do next.
Mm-hmm.
And when the switch is off, we enter a situation looking to isolate responsibility. And that isolation can happen towards us, like, oh, my fault, or, it was probably me. We just automatically assume that we made the mistake when we really haven't evaluated the situation. Or maybe we take on other people's feelings when we shouldn't, and it's none of our business. Or maybe it's the opposite. We try to point fingers, immediately try to say, it was your fault, or who did that, or why isn't this done? I had just a hit me in the face example of me coming home one day after work during COVID with my switch off.
Mm-hmm.
And it had been a rough day, and I was still going to the office, even though nobody was going to the office. And I just had to have my routine. I would go by myself. I'd go through the day because I just needed my structure.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those COVID days where we didn't get anything done. All we did is put out fires all day and pivot. I didn't feel productive. I didn't feel accomplished at all. And I came home. Matt, you'll recognize this. I was in my thinker distress basement,
Mm-hmm.
feeling like nobody can think clearly, nobody can do anything. I'm the only one that's working hard. And I walked into the house, opened the door, looked through the foyer, and the kitchen was a mess. And the first thing I did was I yelled randomly through the house to nobody in particular, except it was to somebody in particular.
Right.
Why is the kitchen a mess? How come the dishwasher's not loaded? And no sooner had the words come out of my mouth than I heard from my daughter's bedroom, Dad, I don't have to do it except for once a day, so just back up off me. And in that moment, all of a sudden I stopped and I said, okay, where are my switches? And what I realized is I walked into the house being completely not responsible for my own crap.
Right.
My distress had nothing to do with my daughter. It was about me. My distress had to do with my need to feel productive, my inability to deal with the grief and loss of control of COVID. So I walked into the house looking to blame somebody, and she was absolutely right. Our deal is that once a day the kitchen needs to be cleaned, and we've agreed it can be any time as long as it's once a day. But me, when I'm feeling out of control, I need everything to be clean. And I was
Right.
looking forward to coming home, pouring a glass of wine, cooking a nice dinner, which is my therapy in a clean kitchen.
Right.
I had all these expectations that nobody knew about except for me.
Right.
So I asked myself, if my responsibility switch was on, how would I have acted differently? And I said, well, the first thing I would do is go apologize to my daughter.
Right.
And the second thing I would do is I would own my stuff and let her know I am responsible for my things. You're not. And so I did. I went and apologized. And I said, here's the problem. I shouldn't have talked to you like that. It's not your problem. Here's what I got to own. And here's what I got to deal with. I said, I'm going to go for a walk because I need to calm myself down. And I said, and I'm just curious, would you be willing to shift your schedule up to clean the kitchen earlier? Because I was really hoping to cook in a clean kitchen. She's like, oh, sure, Dad, no problem.
Right.
So
Right.
not only did I take responsibility for my feelings and my thoughts, but I actually took responsibility for what I wanted by just asking her
Right.
for help. How often do we not own what we want? We don't tell anybody, expecting them to somehow figure it out and do it, and then we resent them when they don't.
Of course.
And that's completely irresponsible. So that's an example of me having my switch off and just saying, look, turn it on, dude, and then how would you act differently?
Yeah, totally. And that example with your kids, mine are younger at this point. You've got teenagers, mine are again 6 and 2, but I have noticed different than the way I was raised. I do try to, when I get, when I'm not in a good space, when the switches are all off, right?
Yeah, all of them.
If I'm not in a good space, I do try to, I won't say I try, I do go back and talk through it and apologize if an apology needs to be made, which was foreign to me, to be honest with you, with like to apologize to a 6-year-old or a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old or whatever age. Sam and I, he's 6, so we've had the most time to interact. I think I've actually he's prepared me for my daughter. But yeah, it was very awkward, right? To feel like, oh well, I'm the parent, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, that doesn't excuse my behavior for being a jackass. I need to go own that I yelled at him, but he didn't really deserve to be yelled at. But I'm going to explain where I was at so he knows that it wasn't really his deal, right? I mean, even at 6.
That first time you ask your son to apologize to somebody for something that they did, and they're going to remember you as the role model on how to do that.
Right.
How often do we ask our children to do things and they're like, well, I don't know how to do this because I never saw you do it.
Right.
Right. And we're hypocrites.
Yeah.
So you truly are role modeling what it means to be responsible for your stuff.
Right. And so typically, how do you work with people in groups then, I guess, or kind of what's the body, what are you guys focused on now?
Well, I wish we'd have had the switches and discovered them years ago, because now we start every training by simply presenting these switches and saying, let's just put this in play and let's see, can we agree to have this be our kind of foundational rules of engagement? Can we just commit to each other that we want to keep our switches on? And and if our switches would on, how would we act with each other through the course of whatever it is we're about to do? Because it's going to be hard. And then, do we have permission to take a break, check in if our switches are dimming, and get them turned back on before we continue? Because we know that when the switches are on, we can't learn, we can't grow, we can't be vulnerable with each other, we can't make forward progress in our relationship. So when the switches are on, that's the number one thing to work on. So we put them out there first. And universally, our clients have said, oh my gosh, what a wonderful way simple way to think about, are we in a good space to be able to move forward and find purpose and meaning and growth? And then how can we check ourselves before we wreck ourselves? And then we get into the hard work of the skill building and the simulations and the practice and the training, because this is just an attitude. This is not, an apology is an art. You realizing I need to go apologize to my son is very different than having the skill to do a good apology.
Right.
That's something we can work on and learn.
Right.
Or saying I need to have more empathy is important, but actually doing it is a trainable, learned skill that we can teach people to do.
Right. Yeah. It's not just a default saying, well, that's just not me, I don't do that.
Yeah.
Right. It is something we can learn. And I think that's important. And I think the other thing that you've kind of driven home here, which have talked about a lot on the show, is at any given point, we're at a choice point, right? We can choose to at least be aware of if that switch is on or off, right? Even if we don't choose to do anything about it, right? We still have the choice to acknowledge where we're at and then make decisions from that position.
I think awareness, so much of the value of self-awareness is it makes us aware of choices that we didn't realize we had and didn't realize we were making. And so being conscious means being response able and aware that we are making choices and we are the consequences of either choice all the time, whether we want it or not.
Right.
Yeah.
And so just for us, for the listeners, for the viewers, kind of, I guess, what's the big takeaway from your study of this, your implementation of this? Kind of what's the big aha moment that you had working once you found the model, once you kind of have helped people understand it? Kind of what's been your kind of maybe a surprise when you started doing the work, or a surprise when you started implementing it?
The first surprise was me and my partner Aaron. We were kind of just brainstorming, and you know how sometimes creativity happens in bursts. And all of a sudden, this was all coming together, and we were mapping it out on a whiteboard, and we had like 9 switches to start with. We're like, no, that's crazy, and we just kept narrowing it down, and we finally thought we had the 3. And our partner Jamie, who Matt, came into the room, and we're like, oh man, we got to tell you all about our switches, and we told her the whole thing, and she soaked it all in, and then she just leaned back, and she was like, well. That's kind of our rules of engagement next element since day one. That's how we've been operating all along, but you're just giving it a name. So that was a big aha for us. But the second aha is when we watch clients that will say, we ask the question, how would you, let's rewind the tape. How would you have said that differently to your son or your peer or your boss if your switches were on? Like instantly say, oh, here's what I said. And like fundamentally change their approach, and the other person just like breaks down. It's like, oh my gosh, you've never said that to me before. So people can dramatically change their behavior by anticipating how they would act if the switches were on, which I think is a great first step. And we can see those breakthroughs happen pretty quick, but then we work on how do you sustain it and how do you do it when the going's tough.
Right. How do you stay in that healthy space, right?
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you. Is there anything else that we needed to, that you wanted to impart today? Because this is a lot of stuff. I mean, I'm like, my head's swimming a little bit.
I went into a lot of detail because we had some more time,
Sure,
but we're
of
going to
course.
be launching an app actually that is the 3 switches. It's going to be active. People can learn all about what we talked about in very simple, easy to reference ways, tips and tools, and kind of a global discussion about how people are using this to change lives. And that's going to be launched early in the year, and it will be free to the world. So we're very out there, and I'll let you know if you're interested in
Yeah, definitely.
getting it out to your constituency. It's free, and we think that anyone that wants to install the switches can go out tomorrow and make a bigger difference with more purpose in the world.
Yeah, we love that. Yeah. We love that. And so the best way to reach out, get a hold of you, what's your website?
It's next-element.com.
Okay, but that's easy.
Dash or hyphen, kind of like a minus sign.
Yep.
Next-element.com. You can find everything, connect with us, contact us, whatever.
Okay, well, perfect. Well, we will definitely put that in the show notes, and people can go out and look at your stuff. And you actually have a lot of other, I mean, we've only talked about a part of what you guys actually do. You're an author, you've written books, you teach other workshops, so it's a whole leadership suite, not just what we talked about today. So we'd love to invite people to go out and check out next-element.com and check out more of the great work that you're doing over there. So thanks for coming on today.
Absolutely. Maria and Matt, it was great visiting with you and great reconnecting. Thanks for what you're doing, and thanks for this podcast. It's another way to make a difference and get the word out.
Certainly. So great podcast today, with Nate Regier from Next Element. He talked about the 3 switches. What was kind of your thoughts around that?
I just loved his daily practice and how he checks in with himself using the 3 switches, which are simple, easy to remember, and being able to check in with yourself and make sure you're functioning with your switches on so that you can relate to others in a more compassionate way.
I thought it was really interesting that when he talked about that, the value, the capability, and the responsibility. But it was what I towards the end of that podcast was really listening to was when he talked about when he asked participants that were in a workshop or were working with these, what they would say if the switch was on, and they all immediately would have different answers in the way they responded. So for me, it was just always that, once we tap into our kind of our internal voice or our internal wisdom, and we tap into that, we have the answers. It's just, are we operating kind of in the head or the heart, so to speak? So yeah, I really enjoyed that podcast today, and I look forward to having him on our podcast in the future.
Yes.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Next Level Method podcast. If you found some value in this, tell somebody about the show. Tell your friends, tell your spouse, tell your kids, let them know all about Next Level Method. And go to nextlevelmethod.com to learn more and join our community. Thanks for tuning in.